Now, in the aftermath of the Adamic and Noahic covenants, we had falls, disasters, sin, etc. But in the aftermath of the Abrahamic covenant, we don't have anything like that. Instead, God proceeds to fulfill those three promises of great nation, great name, and great blessing that had been given to Abraham. That first one, of course, was great nation. So God begins right away to fulfill that. First, he arranges for Abraham's descendants to multiply and grow, and we see that especially in his grandson Jacob. And then Jacob's descendants are brought down to Egypt, which is a great place to be fruitful and multiply, because Egypt had a reliable, abundant food supply and was relatively safe, protected on both sides by great deserts that were difficult to traverse. So Egypt was a peaceful land of plenty where Abraham's descendants could become very numerous, and after a couple hundred years, indeed, they have become greatly numerous, so much so that they pose a threat to the Egyptian population, or the Pharaoh thinks so at least, and at that point, God sends a deliverer, Moses, to lead the descendants of Abraham out of Egypt, out to their own land. And this is the beginning of what we're going to call the Mosaic Covenant. Oh, write that up there. And Moses takes the people of Israel, of course, out of Egypt, across the Red Sea, out into the desert, and brings them to Mount Sinai. And the rationale here is that Moses is trying to form them into a great nation. Now, they have the numbers to be a great nation, but they need some other things. They need some laws so that they're just not a mob of related people, but actually a civil society. And they also need land. And Moses is trying to provide them both. First, the laws at Mount Sinai. So Moses receives the 10 Commandments, and the 10 Commandments are, as it were, the basis of what we might call the civil constitution of the nation of Israel. So I'm making two beams of light coming from Moses' face. That's what it says in the scriptures, that his face shone with light. Beams of light were coming from his face, from being in the presence of God on the top of Mount Sinai. St. Jerome famously mistranslated that, very rare mistake. St. Jerome was a very good translator. But St. Jerome mistranslated the beams of light as horns coming from Moses' face. And that's why if you look on old stained glass windows in a Catholic church or older iconography in our tradition, you'll see these little horns coming from the temples of Moses' head or face. But really they are beams of light from being in the presence of God. So we make those beams of light, and we'll make an indication of the divine presence here. God appeared in the form of cloud and thunder and storm, and basically storm phenomena. So we got our thundercloud and our lightning there. This is indicative of the divine presence at the top of Mount Sinai. And there, again, Moses received the 10 Commandments, which formed the basis of Israel as a nation, gave them a fundamental law. So that is all recorded in Exodus 19 through 24. And in chapter 24, after Moses has read the laws that God has given, not only the 10 Commandments, but also some other civil ordinances in chapters 21 through 23 to kind of shape the common life of the people of Israel, then Moses officiates at a covenant solemnization ceremony where they slaughter animals, and Moses takes the blood and sprinkles it on the people and on the altar of God, indicating that God, represented by the altar, and the people now share one blood. That's a kinship sign, like we often say, he's blood to me, meaning he's family to me. So God and the people now are one family. And then after the blood has been sprinkled, Moses takes some representatives of the people up onto Mount Sinai, and they share a meal with God, what we might call a family meal, indicating that the people of Israel have now become the family of God. Well, you know what it's like being a son of God. We saw that back with Adam. It comes with it things like kingship and priesthood. And that's indicated in Exodus here. In, for example, Exodus 19, verses 5 and 6, God tells the people, if you keep this covenant that I'm about to make with you, you shall be to me a royal priesthood. Well, what is a royal priesthood? It's the privileges that Adam once enjoyed. He was the royal priest before he fell into sin. So that royal priesthood that Adam once enjoyed is being offered to the whole people of Israel if they will keep this covenant that God is giving to them. And we sure hope they will keep it, don't we? But if we've read the story before, we know it doesn't pan out that nicely. After Moses' 40 days on the mountaintop getting instructions for the tabernacle, the people of Israel get pretty tired of waiting for him. They decide to go back to good old foot-stomping, snake-handling Egyptian bull worship. That's what they were used to. So they break the Ten Commandments, starting with the first and most important one, you shall have no other gods before me. They melt down all their earrings and jewelry, give it to Aaron, and he makes this golden calf, and they dance around it, doing the kind of things that ancient people did in pagan worship, which wasn't very pretty, and we won't go into the specifics. But nonetheless, Moses comes down, very upset with them, puts them under martial law, essentially, then goes back up to the mountain and intercedes with God to forgive the people. Now, this is all recorded in Exodus 32. That's the golden calf episode. And then Moses' intercession before God is in chapters 32 through 34, culminating in chapter 34, where we have this reconciliation and God renews the covenant with the people of Israel and gives new tablets. So we're going to erase that crack in the tablets there. We remember that the original tablets were broken by Moses at the foot of the mountain, but then God gives some new tablets in Exodus 34, takes the people back into a covenant relationship with himself due to Moses' intercession. But there's a catch. There's a little bit of fine print in the new contract. Read the fine print carefully. In it comes. Got a lot of fine print there. And another tablet of fine print. And another tablet of fine print. All these additional tablets that are being added into the covenant, these are the books of Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. In particular, all the laws that are contained in those books. You see, God takes the people of Israel back into the covenant, but includes a whole bunch more law that is intended for the purpose of reparation. Okay, just as you go to confession and you confess your sins to your priest, and he gives you a penance to perform. Nothing that's ever bad. You're never told some kind of sin to commit as a penance for the sins that you've already committed. So every penance that's given to you is something that's good in itself, but nonetheless, it's given to you to make reparation for the wrongdoing that you have committed. Likewise, these laws that are included in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, there's nothing wrong with the laws. They're all good in themselves, but they're given as penances for the people of Israel to, as it were, make reparation for their sinful tendencies and indeed return to a status of holiness. Now, Deuteronomy in particular, the third tablet, is rather severe because Moses gives this after 10 rebellions during the 40 years of wilderness wanderings. And by that time, not only are there many additional laws given as penances and reparation, but Moses makes the penalties rather severe, and even in certain instances, like the case of divorce in Deuteronomy 24, lowers the moral standards of the law because he sees that the people of Israel are hard-hearted and not able to follow what is the highest and best of God's ideals for them. So as a result, the Mosaic Covenant ends up in a pretty bad state. Moses is very upset by the end of Deuteronomy. He's mad because he had to spend his retirement from ages 80 to 120. Instead of being at Golden Acres retirement home, he's been leading this people of recalcitrant, hard-hearted Semites all through the desert, and they've been rebelling against him at every opportunity. And so now he's lost his retirement. He's about to die. And as one school child once wrote in her essay, he dies before he ever gets the people into Canada. Well, you know, I have to kind of agree with that. Moses did die before getting the people of Israel to Canada. He didn't even get them to Canaan, much less to North America. But regardless, so he dies on the outskirts of the land before bringing them into the land of Israel. He's unhappy. He places curses on them in the book of Deuteronomy, and that's how the Mosaic Covenant ends. It's been complicated by many additional laws, and some of the moral standards have been lowered as well.